You're listening to the Mike on the Right podcast.
Hey friends, and welcome to the Mike on the Right podcast. I am your host, Mike Neal, and yes, I am broadcasting from the heart of the heartland in central Indiana, the crossroads of America, the great Hoosier State. Continue to like, share, subscribe, 5-star ratings, tell your friends. This show continues to grow because of you, and I am so thankful for each and every one of you along with me on this journey. This is episode 32, December 8th, 2025 release date. And you can hear this episode and all those before it, whether you want to listen to audio or you want to see the video, at mikeontheright.com. That's going to take you to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, anywhere that you get your podcasts, we are there. We're going to talk about 3 pertinent topics that are going on in America today and right around us. And one of them, the first one, kind of gets my goat, kind of grinds my gears. And it is the influencer grip or influencer group grip on the GOP and how this affects modern politics today, both at a national level and at a state level. And then we're going to talk about President Trump's continuing battle to trump the bureaucracy. And to bust the bureaucracy in America. There's some things going on with that in the courts right now. They've continued to be an incremental change. We're going to talk about the entitlement feel in the federal government bureaucracy related to jobs and kind of my position on that. And then we're going to talk about this last item is something that is really hitting home for some people in America, and these are this fight over the Affordable Care Act subsidies or the Obamacare subsidies that are getting ready to expire. And why are we here? What is it? What's actually expiring? Has this expired before? Have you been to this fight before? Where did these particular subsidies come from? We're going to talk about that. But first, we're going to talk about this influencer group grip on the GOP. You know, in Indiana, we have been locked in a battle between House and Senate, State House and State Senate Republicans in Indiana, with the White House and with groups all across America telling us that Indiana needs to redistrict. And on its own, fine, that's a conversation we can and should have. The Indiana House of Representatives passed that measure here this last week. If you're listening to this on Monday, which is the day this releases, if you're listening to it right now on Monday, the state Senate's get ready to take this issue up. We'll see where it goes. There wasn't votes for it before. It was close. We'll see if that has shifted or changed. But between the White House and Indiana is one thing, right? The federal government and the state governments interacting, the political machine of our party in interfacing with the state political system is fine. But there's something that's really kind of just hacked me off, and I hope it hacks you off too, is this group of folks outside of Indiana, almost 99% of them outside of Indiana. Many of them never even been to Indiana before. And this isn't just in the redistricting fight. This is just in general politics. So even take Indiana out of it. But influencer and influencer groups, and I'll tell you what that definition is to me in a moment, coming in and telling states and state political parties how business should and will be done. And I can't I'm already that. I'm a constitutionalist. I'm a states' rights advocate. I'm a state and local government nerd. I believe that the government that is closest to the people is what is most responsive, what governs best. And honestly, your city and town council, your county, are the type of government you're going to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Then next is the state, which is a little further removed, but certainly much further removed, is the federal government. And in that same vein, I believe in state and local control as much as possible. What I don't believe in is Washington overreach in government. And in that exact same vein, I don't want people from D.C., I don't want people from anywhere else in America telling Indiana and forcing Indiana to do anything, or to force Kansas, or to force Montana, or to force California. I mean, there's a federal government apparatus that exists for a reason, and there are certain things that absolutely the federal government should and can control. But anything beyond what it is constitutionally mandated to do and setting basic guardrails for all 50 states to follow, everything else is built on a set of federal minimum standards. That is it. And in the same thing with this, when I talk about an influencer or an influencer group, I'm talking about, influencers on TikTok and social media who have created a persona for whatever reason, right? They got famous because of something, or they look good, or they've got some sort of credential, or they're close to somebody, or they know somebody. And influencers on the whole, in general, aren't bad in America. I'm not trying to attack essentially what is a tenet of business. Influencers in a lot of industries are important to business. I'm totally 100% for that. And honestly, I'm not against influencers in politics and trying to educate people or trying to engage them or trying to whatever, right? I don't mind that. And the same thing with influencer groups. So organizations, so when I grew up, the strongest groups were the college Republicans and the young Republicans. And I ended up being on the board, now 12, 13 years ago, on the state and national board for a term, and was in state leadership for several terms. And now those groups are still important. They're still the day-to-day. They're still the boots on the ground. But there are these large organizations that have kind of built outside of those, like, Turning Point USA and what's going on at CPAC and all these different things. And to educate and to rally, and those are all important things. And I'm not speaking specifically about any group today. This is just a generality, or any specific influencer, though I could think of few, that they just think that they know better than Kansans, or they know better than Floridians, or they know better than Hoosiers, or they know better than Mainers. And I just can't stand people outside of our state or outside of your state coming. There's a fine line, right? We don't want them to not help us engage people, but we also don't want them to tell us how and what to do and how to do things. And I absolutely can't say and most of these influencers, again, this is going to be controversial. I think some of my listeners are probably going to be like, Mike, you're an idiot. Some of these influencers, the only reason that anyone listens to them is because they're good talkers and they look good. Many of them have no credential, no business doing anything in politics and government. Now, to be fair, anyone can step into politics and government, right, as a newbie or what have you. So you run for office or you make your voice heard. You have the right to do that, and they have the right to do that. But then they take that right and they go a step further and say, no, we know better, Indiana. We know better, Hoosiers, or what was a group recently just called us Indianians again, which is offensive to every single Hoosier under the sound of my voice. It's about as bad as the basketball ring in the 2016 presidential election. You'll know which candidate did that. But these influencers take it the next step. I got this audience and I've educated, and those are all good things, and I applaud those things. And now, and we're rallying them to action, but I want to rally them to my action, and I want them to know that I know better, and you need to do this. And look, in this redistricting fight, I trust the Indiana General Assembly, I trust the president, I trust the governor to do what is right for Hoosiers. But beyond that, all these outside groups coming in, and you know what? Citizens in Indiana and groups in Indiana that you want to primary state senators and state house reps, fine, do whatever. But and you know what? You're going to have to raise some money, and some of that's going to be inside Indiana, and some of that's going to be outside Indiana. But these groups that come in here and say, we're walking in here, I've never been to Indiana before, but I'm going to plant my feet in Indianapolis, and I'm going to primary every single person that doesn't do what I want them to do. And this person's from like California or DC or New York. And I'm not saying they're not conservative. I'm not saying they're not a Republican. But they're going to come in here and they're going to say, no, Hoosiers, we're going to take care of your state reps and senators. You don't get the choice. We're going to primary them for you, even though we're not asking them to do that. Now, that doesn't mean we aren't going to do that at any point. It has nothing to do with the politics of the day. We've had that over time. We've seen state reps and state senators fall. We've seen members of Congress fall. We've seen local officials fall because of controversies and people getting fed up with things. And that's exactly what should happen. But I don't need, I'm sorry, some snot-nosed, sniveling influencer that has never set foot in my state coming and telling me who's going to be on my primary ballot and who's going to succeed. That is for us as Hoosiers to decide. Now, you might get hired to come in here. You might help influence because you like someone. Fine, there's a fine line. But do not come into my state and do not tell me how my politics are going to be. That's my choice. That's my right. This is my state. And again, Indiana's the one that matters most to me because I live here. But I will say that about any state across the nation, right? And it's not just redistricting. This is happening more and more, and it is almost like this bullying. Now, some people are going to say, well, Mike, this is what you get for letting Donald Trump into your party. Look, Donald Trump's a New Yorker. New Yorkers just act differently. They talk differently. They work differently. And I'm going to tell you something else. Donald Trump has been a fresh air to make the promises and then to keep them. And sometimes that takes pushing the status quo. And then there's a fine line in that too. But there's a difference between presidents of the United States, in which you are president of all 50 states and you have a right to speak into things going on in each state, though, again, there is a separation of powers. There's a separation between state and federal government, and those all should be respected, and that he can negotiate with governors and state reps and state senators to whatever. Versus an influencer who does not have that right to walk in my state and tell me how my primary is going to be. If you want that, move here and register here and vote here and contribute taxes here. Otherwise, butt out of my state, butt out of Nebraska, butt out of Montana, butt out of Oregon. And this is not even anything to do with the Republican Party. Democrats do it too. What's that hog guy down, the kid that was in the school shooting, and you know what? It should never have happened, and we need to do more about that. But then now he's trying to come into states and tell people who they're going to vote for. He's going to put candidates up in states he's never been because he's something happened to him and he built a name. And it's one thing to influence and rally, and I support that. It's another thing, and then it's something else to support movements going on in those states and the nation. Yes, but then coming into states and telling us that you know better, get out of here. Get out of here. We don't want it. So that's my rant. That's the grind my gears portion of this show. I got to move on, or we'll stay here forever and I'll complain forever. It's not good. It's not good for Hoosiers. It's not good for Kansans. It's not good for Oregonians. It's not good for America. When influencers and influencer groups are going to tell Republicans and Democrats and primary voters and what have you in their states that they know better. That's the same thing that Washington does, and we've been stopping that crap for years, and we need to stop it with influencers and influencer groups too. Moving on, we're going to talk about President Trump and his trumping or busting of the bureaucracy. You have probably heard since President Trump has been in office, and of course he ran on this, was to shrink the size of government. Yip, yahoo. I am 100% for that, 100% back the president in that. And what have liberal groups and unions and what have you, they have tried to stop President Trump at every turn in everything, right? But let's specifically talk about this. And you don't have to be a supporter of President Trump to agree with me. I think we can all agree that government across the whole on the federal side is far too large. We're having that same fight in Indiana right now. Governor Braun is shrinking the size of Indiana's government that has gotten too large. I agree with that wholeheartedly, even though it affected me. I 100% agree with that. President Trump's doing the same, but the difference between what's happening in Indiana and the federal government is that liberals are filing court cases against the government so that the president can't get rid of people. He can't fire them, he can't downsize, he can't reorganize agencies, what have you. And all these people are saying that there's all these rules and all these laws related to this that he can't do this. Well, let me tell you something. I get it. There is power for Congress to create agencies. They have the power of the purse. Those agencies have to be created in the legislature. But if they're not quasi-judicial or quasi-legislative, or the positions don't have terms or what have you, barring obviously whatever Congress might write in there if the president can end somebody's term or early, like an FCC commissioner or board of governors for the Fed or what have you. There's some rules and laws around that stuff. The standard bureaucrat in the standard agency is in an executive agency and is 100% 100% responsible to the executive. Now, the executive agencies can put, they can only be fired for XYZ things, or you can be fired at will, or there are protections. The executive can put all those things in as long as the will of the legislature allows, and they can have protections. But otherwise, no, you don't get to come to government, especially at the federal level, and get to expect a job the rest of your life. The federal government is bloated and has been bloated for decades. And it seems like, well, we have to have this program. We have to do this. We have to spend this money. No. The reason we are in such deep debt is because we can't stop ourselves. We can't stop spending money. We can't stop hiring bureaucrats. We can't stop growing government. We can't stop building a program. We can't. We have to. But every time someone gets into power, they don't do it. Now, I think President Trump has done more than any recent president to try to shrink government and to shrink spending. But the bureaucracy continues to have a hold. It's got its ugly little tentacles on every little thing, and all these outside groups are suing and slowing the progress. And there's one thing, if there's again something in legislation that doesn't allow something, but other than that, the executive is the executive, and he or she should control the size and scope outside the bounds of the law. So if the law says they will do XYZ, great. Everything else is up to the executive. Period. That happens in state government today, right now. And again, you can put rules and regulations if you sign contracts with whatever. But once those things expire and once those things goes away and once those things, whatever, the executive is the executive. It's the same thing in business. Companies shrink because of a change strategy. Companies shrink because maybe they lost grant money. Companies shrink maybe because they lost a product line or it's done poorly. Companies reorganize and shrink because a new CEO comes in or a new board, or they're changing tactics, or they're, let's use Walmart, for example. I was using this the other day with somebody who was talking about why Sears died. Sears died because they never changed their business model. And Walmart was going to do the same thing if it didn't start moving to an Amazon-like business model where there was a lot of e-commerce. Not that people don't go into the store, but it can't be the bread and butter anymore for them. And any company that doesn't involve itself in e-commerce at a strong level is going to fall apart. Walmart came in and reorganized. They got rid of some people. They added some people. That doesn't mean that their workforce, I don't know if it got bigger or got smaller, but it changed. You have to change. And government is doing too many things it doesn't need to do. Now look, the Constitution certainly didn't envision certain things that are going on today, right? So in there it says the government's for a common defense, and it's for the mail, and it's for building roads. And there are probably a couple of things that the federal government should be doing. But beyond core items and setting federal minimum standards, the federal government should have no further power. That power should be left to state and local governments. Period. No, we do not need to continue to have the assistant vice deputy director of basket weaving at the Department of who knows what. No, we don't need that many assistant vice deputies. We don't need that. We've got to cut that. We've got to cut spending. We can't continue this deficit spending that we are doing. One day we will reach the position of Greece. And a big part of that is the bloated federal government. And incrementally, I was just reading a piece in Politico, which kind of fired me up for this discussion today. This piece in Politico says that Trump has incrementally been using the courts to enact his already, in my opinion, right as president and as executive to shrink and reorganize these agencies. It has to happen. And we need to see big cuts in these too. The Doge initiative fell apart for reasons beyond understanding, and it's entirely disappointing. But that can't be done yet. And I call on Congress. Every member of Congress has got to get a balanced budget and then start looking at ways to pay off some of this debt now. Period. And I think President Trump is trying to do his part. But, we've got Democrats and liberals who are all telling us, we have to spend this money. We have to give this money to this country. We have to do this. We have to do that. When the courts have largely said, no, they don't. Does the executive really need to spend every dollar that's appropriated by Congress? I know it doesn't happen. I have been on the receiving end of that as someone who managed federal grant money. I didn't have to spend it all. I had to complete my mission, but if I can do so cheaper, if I can do so more efficiently, then yes. And no agency should be spending all of its dollars. In fact, just like in state government, we've had since several governors. I know for sure Pence, because I was in that administration. I know Eric Holcomb did it. I know that Braun's doing it. Is, okay, hey, here's your 100% of your budget. You need to hold 3% of it from your daily budgeting activities. That way, one, if something goes over, there's money so we don't have to reach into another pocket. And two, if you don't spend it all, it goes back into the general fund so we can continue to keep taxes at a responsible level. Indiana has got one of the lowest income taxes, state income taxes in the nation, beyond those that have zero. But of course, they have larger sales taxes or larger property tax. Take your pick, right? But Indiana has a relatively low, and even it's not progressive, income tax. We only can do that because of the fiscal restraint that Indiana has continued to have. It's not perfect. It needs to get better, but it's better than the federal government. Heck, a kid managing a lemonade stand is better than the fiscal system of the federal government, because all we got to do is print the stupid money to continue programs and initiatives and staffing that liberals and courts continue to tell us we have to do. And finally, some common sense coming out of the courts that are saying, no, the executive is the elected leader. He can lead the agencies as long as the law doesn't tell him he's got to do exactly this. There is no mandate to spend all the money, and we've got to stop that. Period. And I am rooting on President Trump, right? Just in your life. If your budget says you've got $500 in groceries for the month, you don't have to spend all $500. You might. You may have no choice. But if you get away with, oh, well, you know what? It's the last day of the month and it's $450. You know what? You can put that $50 in a savings. You can reallocate it somewhere else. You can say whatever. Same thing in our lives has to happen at the federal government. Again, I could continue to go on this piece forever. I shouldn't, because the show will run long. Last item I have for you is this fight over ACA, or American, or the Affordable Care Act subsidies. Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, was a disaster of a law and legislation, which is exactly scientifically proven has driven up costs in healthcare to unsustainable levels. And of course, Democrats don't want to take credit for it because now, right, they all kind of push their way away from it as much as possible. Well, that was 2009, that was President Obama, we can blame him, right? Or they just stay silent. Nah, it's the Republicans because they're in control, or they did this or they did that. No, Obamacare is what has destroyed the American healthcare system as we know it. And it is, I remember in 2009, I think it actually enacted in 10, my healthcare plan was deemed illegal. And I lost my healthcare coverage. I had to find something else. Which is absolutely, absolutely ridiculous. And I remember, President Obama, if you like your doctor, you can keep him. If you like your health insurance plan, you can keep him. That was the biggest crock of crap in this decade, and honestly, since I've been in politics, this is one of the biggest lies in American history, and it continues to plague us today. And then we're all like, the Republicans don't have a plan to fix it. Blah, blah, blah. Well, no, the Democrats are the one that drove this thing absolutely out into the lake, and then abandoned it and said, somebody help us. So now we have these subsidies, right? Because in order for Obamacare to work, the federal government has to put money in. Now look, for those that cannot help themselves that need help, like on Medicaid, or like in Indiana, the Healthy Indiana plan, I am 100% for, as a Christian, a conservative, just a general human being, that we should be helping people who can't help themselves. But for everybody else who can, they should at least have some skin in the game if they're on Medicaid, or they should be kicked off the Medicaid rolls because they should be working and supporting themselves. Period. Those that actually need help, that's what those things and programs are for. Put that to the side. These subsidies, because the Obamacare system will not operate unless these subsidies exist. There have been subsidies since that time, right? And now that's what I like about the Healthy Indiana plan is that for most people requires some skin in the game. Even if it's $25 a month as your premium, it still have to put money in the game that helps sustain the system. Obamacare can't live without any sort of subsidy, period. And so now there's these subsidies that are in question. And these subsidies that we're talking about right now are not the ones that were created in 2009 and since then. They're COVID subsidies that were created in 20 and 21 to help stabilize the Obamacare system, which was already a massive failure, and the exchange was a massive failure, and why so many states asked for waivers to create their own plans, like Healthy Indiana Plan in Indiana, and not follow the crap fest that Obamacare created. And these subsidies that we're talking about were created during COVID, which again, there was a lot of federal spending. We all got, Trump dollars and then Biden dollars. We all got these stimulus monies, and there was all types of infrastructure projects and all these things, right? Those came through. Well, then they were extended a couple years later in a bill that President Biden, it was the Infrastructure Act. I'm forgetting the name of it now. I had it written down, and I'm getting better at not using my notes. And so, but the bill that Democrats passed on infrastructure, they added the subsidies and extended them because they expire. And now here they are expiring again. Why now it's like, oh, if Republicans don't extend these, then they hate Americans and they hate healthcare and they want people to lose their insurance and they want this and they want that. No, these were temporary to begin with. Just because they came in COVID doesn't mean they should be permanent. This was a temporary help in a time. That's the time when we use credit card. Dave Ramsey, if he's listening to this, is going to hate me. We use credit cards because of the credit card points. We pay it off every month. We have not had an interest rate the entire time of our marriage, period. And my wife I don't think any ever had any. I had a couple, but we've never had interest charges because we always pay off our bill. But if we were in a deep emergency, that's what the credit card and deficit spending is for, not just average, everyday, run-of-the-mill business. And this is the same thing here, right? The ACA subsidies and what have you to stabilize the healthcare market and help people, great. But that's only temporary. It is now 2025, days away from 2026, and here we are still arguing about COVID subsidies. But the Democrats are so dishonest about it, they won't tell you where they came from. It just says these Republicans just hate healthcare and they hate helping people. No, we don't. But this was not meant to be permanent, and it is not sustainable. Go back to the conversation we just had about the bureaucracy and about the spending. This is just another spend fest. That's why healthcare in America has to be completely reorganized, and insurance is a scam. And the healthcare system, we're going to bill you $8,000, but your cash price is $250. But they're going to write off all that money as a loss, even though they're making money hand over fist. We have to have a complete revitalization of the system. But these ACA, don't be fooled. And this is not, I'm trying not to make this a partisan rant, but somebody is being dishonest about this, intellectually dishonest, and it's the Democrats who are telling us that if we don't pass this, Republicans hate healthcare, and they're just gutting poor people's healthcare. These were not permanent. These were temporary. These are from COVID. Nothing else is changing. I have to leave it there, or this show will go on forever. Thank you so much for being here today. Again, like, share, 5-star ratings, subscribe. This episode and all others, MikeOnTheRight.com. You can find them there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, YouTube, if you want to watch the video. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a great